In this video, I'm going to be explaining a plugin called Null-LS. If you're following along with the From Scratch series, then you can check out the 14 Null-LS branch and follow along with all of the same code. If you're doing this with your own config, I still recommend heading over to this repository and checking out some of the code here so you can better follow along with the video. All right, so before I actually get into how to configure and install it and all that stuff, I'm going to show you how it works, and I'm going to explain some just kind of language server protocol concepts and language server concepts. All right, so I'm just going to open up a Lua file, and you should already have some idea of how LSP works and how like a language server works for your particular language. If you don't have any idea how that stuff works yet, then I recommend checking out the LSP video that I have in this playlist as kind of a primer for this video. All right, so you can see that I kind of introduced an error here, and then I got this little red X over here, and you can see that it's a Lua syntax check, and it's just telling me that I have some problem. You can also see something that the LSP provides is if I do something like require here, it provides potentially things like snippets and also things from the LSP like keywords, functions, so on and so forth, right? So yeah, that's basically just some stuff that your language server may provide. But many language servers, for instance, don't provide things like formatting. So if I put this all the way out here, and then I put that over there, and then we'll take this and move it there, you can see that the formatting is just not very good right now, right? And so what we can do with Null-LS is we can, and this is also kind of important, but I'll explain like why this is more like kind of important later. But if we do lua vim.lsp.buff.formatting, for instance, right? Now this command is important, and we can bind this to some easy key binding later. Like you can make this leader F for format or something like that later if you'd like to. But we're going to press enter, and you can see that now my entire file is formatted. Now this is the command, and we're going to, like I said, I'm going to explain why this command is, it's important that Null-LS uses this command in the future. But basically you can see that it hooked into the regular LSP, like built into Neovim, to provide that formatting. And that formatting is not provided by the Lua language server that I have active. So how's that working? And how that's actually working is it's using a binary on my system called style Lua, right? And I'm going to show you a few more languages, and then I'm going to show you how to actually set this up. So another language that I'm going to show you really fast is going to be JavaScript or JSX here. So actually, let me show you this pre-formatted. So I already formatted this earlier. So you can see that we have a semicolon, and then we have two double quotes here. We have double quotes around pretty much everything, right? And then also we can introduce some other problems here. So I'll just move some of these things over a little bit. And so you can just see the formatting is maybe not ideal. Maybe you have a project where everybody's using single quotes and no semicolons, and then also all this junk over here. You don't want to have to, like, you know, come in here and delete that yourself, delete all this white space yourself. So you want to use something like prettier. And prettier, if you don't know a lot of JavaScript or whatever, it's the same thing, kind of like how style Lua just was for Lua. It's essentially a binary on my system that formats JavaScript code. So now if I do the same thing I did before, I do lua vim.lsp.buff formatting sync, and I press enter, you can see that now we have it formatted to, you know, the specification that I wanted, right? So Null-LS provides formatting. You might think that that's the only thing that Null-LS does at this point, but it actually does a good amount more than that. So we're going to go take a look at another project. Let's go to repos again and to-do list, and I have a Python project in here. And you can see that we have this big, you know, like inside these parentheses, there's this big white space right here. And you can see that there's some errors up here, and they're being reported from Pyrite. Now, Pyrite is a language server. So the language server is telling me, like, okay, I can't find these things. The reason for that is I just don't have them installed right now. They're just not active with the virtual environment. But this is all coming from my language server. Now, here, this isn't coming from my language server. This thing is telling me that there's white space before and after these parentheses here. This is coming from something totally separate. This is coming from something called flake8, which is an external linter, but it's not a language server, but it does lint Python code, right? So how can I use flake8, kind of use it the same exact way, or get it to provide me diagnostics the same way that Pyrite, the language server for Python, would? So you can see Pyrite is giving me diagnostics, and also a binary on my system called flake8 is giving me diagnostics. Another cool thing is that we could use something like black to format and get rid of that, right? So now we can also format in here as well. So you can see that now Null-LS provides formatting, it provides diagnostics, and it actually provides more than that, but I think I'm going to scope this video to formatting and diagnostics because I think that's what most people are going to want to use this for. All right, so now let's go take a look at how to set this up, pass arguments that you would want to pass, and do all that kind of good stuff. So it's actually really, really, really easy to set this up, but it's kind of hard to figure out, all the connections that are being made here. It's kind of hard to connect everything together because there's a lot of moving parts here. So Null-LS is the plugin. So let's go and open up where we keep our plugins. I keep mine under Lua user plugins. I use Packer. If you use Vimplug or whatever, it's basically like the same thing. You're just going to want to install the plugin. And you can see I have it installed right here, Null-LS, okay? You are going to need mvim lsp config and all that kind of good stuff. So if you don't know how that works, then go and check out my video on, it's earlier in this playlist for LSP. Okay, so now you can go and look at the README, and basically this is all you would have to do. You would just require Null-LS, you would pass it some sources like style Lua. Style Lua is what we're using for Lua formatting. So you can see we have style Lua for JavaScript. It was prettier, and then also it was black to do formatting in Python, and then also flake8 did diagnostics in Python. So basically these are some binaries that you're also going to have installed on your system to get this to work. For instance, for style Lua, it's a Rust program, so you could cargo install style Lua, right? That's how you would install style Lua. For black or flake8 or whatever, you would pip install black or whatever else, right? npm for prettier. You would usually use your language's package manager or some other language's package manager, or even potentially your system's package manager. Okay, so let's kind of move on a little bit here, and now let's take a look at my configuration. So we're going to go under Lua/user, and then I have this under LSP and under Null-LS, okay? And you can see I basically just have the same thing, but I just kind of simplify things a little bit. So null-ls.builtins.formatting, you can see they have this require Null-LS built-ins formatting. I just made it simpler so that formatting is just, you're just going to use formatting here. It's just a local variable. And then diagnostics is its own variable too. So you don't have to type that out every single time you want to add a new source. Okay, and now you might be asking yourself, like, okay, what sources does Null-LS support? It would be nice if they had something, I guess, in the README, or potentially, I don't know, maybe if they have something in the wiki. I don't know if they have what's supported in the wiki or on the README, but a good place to go looking for this is if you go to the Null-LS repository. If you go under Lua Null-LS here, you click on built-ins, and then you're going to see kind of what it supports. So there's code actions, completion, diagnostics, formatting, and hover. The ones I'm going to be kind of like focusing on are diagnostics and formatting, but if you kind of wanted to take a deep dive with completion, code actions, and hover, you could go and do that as well and see what it provides. All right, so for instance, if we go into formatting, remember that we used 3 different formatters in this video so far. We used style Lua, so you can just kind of search for what it supports. So we know it supports style Lua because we found that there. All right, does it support black? Right, okay, there's black. And does it support prettier? And there's prettier, and then also some other variations of prettier, right? So just kind of go in here and look for whatever formatter that you use for your language. It will likely be in here. Same thing for a linter. Linters, when I say linter, I mean diagnostics. Diagnostics and linter is kind of the same word in my mind, right? So you can go in here and then remember the linter that we used flake8, and there's flake8. eslint is a really popular one for JavaScript. It's actually also a formatter, or I guess a fixer or whatever. But yeah, it's also a formatter, so you could actually use it as a formatter as well. And you can kind of go through here and see, you know, if you wanted to add an extra linter for your language, you could go through here and do that as well. After that, it's pretty easy to set it up. So you would just do, like I have these local variables here, but you would just do, for instance, I don't know, like, let's see if there's anything in here that I could really use. We could change one of them. For instance, the black one, we could change that to formatting.yapif, and that's another Python formatter, right? So now if we go out, and we need to make sure that it's actually installed, so we know we have yapif. And now if we go and we open our Python file again, and we put a big space here again, or a bunch of spaces, and we do lua vim.lsp.buff.formatting sync, you see that it still does that. Now, how do we know that it's using yapif and not black? Well, we have a command called null-ls info, and we should see here that active sources are yapif, so it's actually not using black anymore. It was using black before. And whoops, that kind of kicked me out of there. And then we're also using flake8 as another active source. You can see the methods that are available as well, like formatting and range formatting. And for flake8, we can see that methods are diagnostics. And you can also actually go down here and see supported formats, so autopep8, black, isort, all these kind of things here. So you could probably, I guess that's an even better way if you just opened up your particular language or whatever you wanted to do. You could just do null-ls info, go down to supported sources, and then see what it supports. Grab one of these here, and then when you go to configure null-ls, you just add one of those names there. The only thing is, again, you have to make sure that you have that binary installed. You have to make sure that it's accessible on your path, right? All right, so the next thing would be these extra arguments. So you can see that I have some extra arguments passed here to prettier, just kind of as an example, and also to black. For black here, I have fast. Fast was an option, so I set it. I don't really know. I just assume it makes things faster. I don't really know exactly what it does. For prettier, you can remember that it got rid of the semicolons. You can remember that it put single quotes everywhere, and also in the JSX, it also puts single quotes. So that's kind of how this works here. If you want to pass these arguments directly, these binaries also will respect a configuration file. So for instance, for prettier, you typically use like a prettier RC file in your project. In that case, I would recommend just kind of getting rid of these extra arguments. I'm not sure which ones take precedence, but you can play around with it. I'm assuming that this will take precedence, though. Like what you pass here will end up being what is respected. So if you don't want these things here and you want to respect some sort of prettier RC file or something like that, I recommend just getting rid of these arguments just in case. All right. Yeah, so that's how to do diagnostics. That's how to do formatting. And that's basically what null-ls is. It's just a way to use, it's a way to hook into the LSP stuff, like the LSP functions and stuff like that provided by Neovim. You'll notice, and this is, I think I said earlier that I was going to explain the significance of using this command, right? The reason that this is significant is because we're using the built-in LSP to do the formatting, even though the language server doesn't support formatting. Some other plugins, what they'll likely do is something like format or something like that. They'll provide one of their own commands rather than using what's built in. And I think it's better to use what's built in, because when I want to go set, for instance, a key binding somewhere, I don't want to have to format with this plugin one way, and then here's another thing that also is can be confusing, but some language servers support formatters, right? For instance, you'll notice, if you may have tried this before, and you may have just seen me do that with Prettier on JavaScript, right? And here's what you may have noticed, right? If we go into handlers really fast and for LSP, and I have a thing called, or I have a little piece of logic here that says, if the TypeScript server is active, then turn off document formatting. Imagine I didn't have this there, right? So let's get rid of that there. And we'll come back in here and save this. And then I'm just going to open up another terminal here. And if I now go open repos, my blog, and we'll do source, and what did I have? Okay, we'll open this. And now imagine that I do formatting. So if I come in here and I do this, now it's asking me, do you want to use TS server or do you want to use Null-LS? And that's really annoying, right? So what I'm saying is this. How do we find the name of our current active language server? We do LSP info, okay? And the current active language server for this is TS server. And then actually Null-LS also attaches itself as like kind of a language server in and of itself, right? Kind of a general language server. And then you can see, okay, TS server is active and it provides like formatting and all this other kinds of stuff, right? So not only does it provide diagnostics, so you can see that we have diagnostics here, but it also, and not only, you know, completion and that kind of stuff, but it also provides formatting as well. And we don't want to have to, you know, make this decision every single time, because that's extremely annoying, right? So now what we're going to do is whenever you set up, you can see I have this onAttach function for LSP. And if you follow along with my LSP videos, or you already understand how LSP works, you should understand the onAttach function is essentially a hook that you pass to when you set up your LSP. And what this gets automatically, like when you set up the LSP, is it gets a client. And that client is the name, or you can get the name of the client off of this object here, this table, right? So then we say if client.name is TS server, then client.resolved capabilities document formatting, we set that equal to false. Now, once that's true, when we come back in here and we go to format again, we, you know, it just uses Null-LS by default. So we've disabled it for that. So if your language server already has formatting built in and you notice that's starting to collide with Null-LS, go into your onAttach and you can access the client, get the name of your server, and then just turn off document formatting like this. All right, another thing that you can do, and I'll just kind of put this here, is we're going to create a command. And this command here, what it does is it executes that vim LSP buff formatting. And this really should be synchronous, but whatever. And so what this does is it allows me to go like this. If I do format, okay, and I can just do format just by typing in format like this. And I can use the LSP based, like the built-in LSP way of formatting, the function that they provide. Since Null-LS hooks into that. Okay, and the other thing you could do, obviously, is like set a key mapping for this as well. And it's kind of a little bit out of the scope of this video, but we could do something like leader F would then be equal to format, right? And then every single time that you press leader F, it would run your format executable, and then you wouldn't have to type out all that stuff. You could just kind of come in here. We could create a problem really fast, do leader, or oops, that's leader L, leader F, and there you go, formats for us. Okay, so that's kind of my explanation for Null-LS. There's a lot more that Null-LS provides. So like for instance, if we go into this, let's make it nice and big so you can see. If we go into the built-ins here and we look at things like completion, there's a couple other things we can get, like spelling completions and some tags and things like that. Code actions. I know one useful one I've seen was for get signs. So I showed you get signs was another plugin in this series. There's actually some code actions you can get along with get signs that I won't go over in this video. Maybe I will in a future one if there's interest. And then the last thing was, wait, let's go back in here. I think would be hover. And I guess there's hover for dictionary or something like that. Maybe, I don't really know what it does, but that's something that you could go explore if you are interested. All right, so that's my explanation for Null-LS. That also is, I know that TS server thing is kind of a pitfall. So many people keep running into that, and they're like, how do I turn this thing off? And that's how you would do it. But yeah, that's my explanation for Null-LS. If you are enjoying the series, you can sponsor the project over on GitHub or support me on Patreon. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video.